Hello, how's it going, everyone? My name is Deathcaster, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an overhead GUI, where it basically shows the player's name over the player's character. The reason why I'm doing this is because I've seen a lot of players buy up all those overhead GUIs, and they risk getting a backdoor from it. So the purpose of this video is to teach and to inform you guys how to make your own so that you don't run that risk. Plus, you won't need to depend on a free model to be able to make your own. This video's resolution might seem blurry, or some parts might seem blurry. That's because the resolution's kind of wonky. I don't know how to fix that. That's something with the Windows recorder. But without further ado, let's get into this. First thing we need to do is to create a part. What are you doing all the way over here? Come here, you. Now that we have our part, let's get our billboard GUI. Now you might be wondering why did we do that? Oh my god, that welt's gonna bother me. Get rid of that. You might be wondering why did we put the billboard GUI in here? Well, that is because we are going to be reusing this billboard GUI. It'll help prepare us for when we do actually use it. And it'll save on resources because then we won't have to create a new one from scratch each and every time. We can just use this base one and clone it into a player's head or something. Next thing we need to do is in the properties of this billboard GUI. First thing we need to do is get the Adorny property and set it to the part. Now, you might not know this, but it's something similar with selection boxes and selection spheres like these two right here, as you can see. Me hovering over them. Although, for example, they might be in the player GUI, the player's player GUI, where it holds all the GUI elements. If you set the Adorny to the part, then it'll appear where the part is at and will not be hidden. Same thing with the billboard GUI. It may be in the player's player GUI, but as long as the Adorny is set to a part, it'll appear over that part. Next thing we're going to want to do, since the player's head is a bit big, is to set studs offset world space to 3. And as you can see on screen, that's the distance it'll be from the player's head. Excellent. Light influence, I'm going to turn that all the way down to 0 because you want people to be able to see the players' names, right? Next up, we want to change the x-axis of the size. We want to change this to 2 and then set the scale to 1 because scale works with resolution while offset works with pixels. Now let's go ahead and create our text label. Yeah, that's how it looks. First thing we're gonna do is set the size for this text label. I didn't expect it to be so small. Let's go ahead and fix that. Alright, so let's change it to 3. Still kind of small, isn't it? Alright, then let's change it to 10. Oh dear God, that's big.
That's what she said!
We probably don't need it that big. Let's set it to 8 and set this to 2. Perfect. So it'll be that size right above the player's head. So for the billboard GUI, set the size, the X scale to 8 and the Y scale to 2. Back to the text label. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to do it because it looks better to me. Set the background transparency to 0.5. Make it dark. Looking good already. Get rid of the border size pixel. Source sans, no, source sans. Let's change it to Arial Bold because Arial Bold is the godliest of all. The fonts. Let's see, set the text stroke to 0.8 and the text transparency to 0.2. Now you can do this if you want to. I'm going to set the text scaled to true and I'm going to enter in an example name. Their name here. Just as a sort of placeholder. Looks good already, doesn't it? I might actually soften this up a wee bit. Change it. There we go. That looks much better. And this is our Adorny thus far. What's with the... Oh, I thought there was a blue border for some reason. That's weird. But that's basically how it'll look to other players. You can mess around with this however you want, but that's basically how I set it up. Let's give this billboard GUI a name. Let's call it overhead GUI and player name for the text label. That looks good, doesn't it? Yeah, wonderful. It is wonderful. Alright, the next thing we're going to be doing is the programming part of it. So you want to go over to server script service and find script, because I use scripts a lot. It's under my frequently used. I am a programmer after all, so it's my specialty. So first thing we want to do, take the overhead GUI and put it inside this script. You can put it wherever you want. I'm just personally going to put it there. Next thing we're going to do is add or create a new variable that will be defined to the player service, because we're going to be using the player service. Next thing we're going to want to do is do overhead GUI is set to script wait for child overhead GUI. I might get criticized for that because I put the I used wait for child, but I'm just doing it there to be safe. Now, create our local function. Let's call it on player added. Let's call this new player. So now we have our function set up that which will be used to execute when a player joins the game. If you wanted to, you could do players dot player added connect on player added. Get rid of those extra parentheses. Now for the new player, what we want to do is new player dot character added connect function. Then we can name this new character. Now, as the name suggests, character added executes when, well, the player's character is added to the workspace or something, and it returns the player's character as one of the function parameters. There's actually a little something I want to do to sort of change this up. Because remember what I said before about the adornies, how they don't exactly have to be inside of the parent for it to be able to show? Why don't we utilize that? So local overhead GUIs is set to instance.new folder overhead GUIs dot name is equal to overhead GUIs. I just uppercase them to kind of separate them from the rest of the game, and set the parent to the workspace. Let's create a new workspace variable real quick. Game get service workspace. There we go. That's much better. Do a double space to make it look a bit cleaner. Now, here comes the fun part. Now we can do local head is set to new character wait for child head, because the head isn't going to be there right away, so it's a good idea to have a wait for child there. Like the saying goes, script executes before the player's character is ready. That's why you use character added to listen for when the character is, well, added. Alright, so now we have a variable for the head. Let's create a new variable for new overhead GUI. And what we're going to be doing here is overhead GUI clone. Fairly simple, am I right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, you probably don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Local player name text is new overhead GUI wait for child player name, so that we can just quickly access it without having to go new overhead GUI dot player name dot text is equal to something. We can just do player name text dot text is equal to whatever. Now what we can do is player name dot text is equal to new player dot name new overhead GUI dot parent is set to overhead GUIs. Now, regardless of what I just wrote in here just now, I'm actually going to be cutting that section of code and putting it in here. right before the character added, so that it creates all this beforehand. And then when we go here, we can just do new overhead GUI dot adorny is set to the player's head. Fairly simple, am I right? Now, you might be wondering, what if the player rejoins the server? It's going to create a whole new one. Well, that's quite a simple fix. What we can do is, let's space that out a bit, is overhead GUIs find first child, new player dot name, overhead GUI. And then if that returned nil, because find first child will either return the child or it'll return nil, meaning it didn't find it. Didn't find it, set the variable to that, space it out if you want. And now, actually, let's change the script. Let's call this overhead script. That look good to you guys? Looks pretty good to me. Now, let's go over local workspace is game get service workspace, players is game get service players. Overhead GUI is set to the overhead GUI that's within the script. Overhead GUIs is set to a new folder, that which is added into the workspace. On player added, which will be picked up when a player enters the server. Checks for an already existing overhead GUI in the, I should probably specify this as a folder. Bear with me, I just don't want to create too much confusion for you guys, which I probably already have. Sorry about that. I can never make up my mind. It is my one downfall. Checks the folder to see if it's already there. And if not, it creates a new one. Let's actually do this. New overhead GUI dot name is equal to new player dot name concat overhead GUI. Just to sort of keep consistent with our variables. There we go. That looks much better, doesn't it? Much better. So it clones, gets the player name, which is where it displays the player's name. New overhead GUI dot name is set to new player dot name. Overhead GUI player dot name dot text is the player's name. New parent is the folder. Listens for the player's character to be added. Returns the player's character. Gets the player's head. And then sets the adorny to the head. And obviously for the last section, it listens for when a new player joins and executes this function in the first place. Now, shall we go see what this does? You can just hit F5, but personally I've gotten a habit of pressing the button. And there we go, just like that. We set up an overhead GUI. Best part is, when you zoom away from the camera, it'll get smaller. Now, you might be wondering, but wait, what about the player's usual name? Isn't it going to pop up down here? And you would be correctamundo. If it really bothered you that much, what you could do is local humanoid is set to new character, wait for child, humanoid. And then we can do humanoid dot display name is set to nothing. And it's as simple as that. Hit the play button once again, and obviously it's not going to show it here, but if you were to test it out with a friend, it won't show your name. And this is how you make an overhead GUI. I hope this helped you in your future endeavors. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask down below. Time for my usual outro, I guess. If you guys like this video, hit that like button, maybe share it. And if you want to keep up with content like this, hit that red subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, stay clean, especially with this pandemic going on. And bye!